Welcome to Peptide-Proof, your source for rigorous, independent, evidence-based peptide intelligence. Today we're looking at the downward migration of peptides into body care.
So what we're witnessing right now is this genuinely fascinating macro trend. We're talking about the literal downward migration of high-level facial science to, well, everything below the neck. The era of just slapping on a basic functional body lotion, that's pretty much over. Instead, we've officially entered the era of active targeted body serums. And to really understand this massive structural shift, we're going to focus on a primary indicator that just hit the market. It's a brand new launch from the Australian brand EAORON.
On August 17, 2026, EAORON launched what they're calling their Firming Butt Essence. Now, I know, look past the name for just a second and really focus on the format and the price point here. Retailing at $89.99 Australian dollars, this is a massive departure from standard body care. But the truly disruptive part? It's the format. They've completely ditched the traditional bulk pump lotion for a daily capsule essence. This tells us there's a total transfer of facial serum logic happening, specifically the use of peptides, collagen, and caffeine applied directly to gluteal care. It's really all about precision dosing.
Now, this launch doesn't just exist in a vacuum. As you can see in this flowchart, it's part of a broader, systemic evolution that we like to call the skinification cascade. Historically, the face has always been the baseline for active peptides, right? But over the last 2 years, we've watched this cascade move to the lips, with products like Pharmacy's $22 lemon mint peptide smoothies. Then, it made its way to hair, with L'Oreal Elvive bringing collagen peptides into play for scalp and strand health. And now, the cascade has hit the body, with EAORON's premium peptide complexes for gluteal firming. So the big takeaway here isn't just the novelty of a quote-unquote best essence, it's the complete, uncompromising transfer of facial formulation logic to the rest of the body.
Let's actually deconstruct this structural stack, because this is where the science gets really interesting. Looking at this diagram, you can see this architecture mimics a high-end facial anti-aging serum, definitely not your basic hydration product. Notice the tactile profile. They're using vitamin E and hydrolyzed collagen to give you that immediate surface plumping feel. Then, the firming mechanics rely on caffeine, soybean extract, and fibronectin to support microcirculation and a tightened appearance. For structural support, they've packed in specific peptide complexes and wild yam extract for long-term contour signaling. And finally, the nourishing base uses rosehip, jojoba, wheat germ, sweet almond, and sunflower seed oils for lipid replenishment. It's a highly deliberate, fully facial-grade architecture.
So, why go with daily capsules? It's not just a premium aesthetic choice. Honestly, it's a functional necessity. This illustration really highlights why. Highly reactive peptide molecules are notoriously unstable. When you just drop them into a standard jar or a pump bottle, that repeated air exposure causes oxidation, which absolutely degrades the active compounds. In fact, this instability is the root cause of so many formulation failures in the peptide market. By using a single-dose hermetic seal, the brand is actually defending these unstable compounds from oxygen, guaranteeing maximum potency the very second it touches the skin.
And beyond just oxidation defense, these capsules solve a really critical behavioral problem, which is dosage logic. Looking at this line graph, you can see that with an open jar or pump, human behavior is pretty erratic. We use way too much one day and barely any the next. But peptides? They operate on very strict biological signaling pathways. To actually trigger a cellular response, you need consistent, exact volumetric application to stay right within what we call the optimal cellular response zone. That single-dose capsule basically forces the consumer to use the clinically effective dose every single time.
However, taking facial formulas and applying them to the body requires a total reset in consumer expectations. As this diagnostic matrix shows, the anatomy flat out demands it. Facial skin is relatively thin and delicate, which allows for rapid penetration of active ingredients and a pretty short to medium efficacy cycle. Gluteal skin, on the other hand, is highly dense. It's thick, it's durable, and it has a much lower penetration efficiency. Because of these anatomical realities, the active ingredients demand an extended cycle. You literally have to stick with the protocol much longer to yield any visible results.
Beyond the headlines.
Into the research. Peptide-proof.
The core barrier to this efficacy lies right here in the stratum corneum. Gluteal skin is biologically designed by nature for durability and friction resistance. Because of this, its stratum corneum is dramatically denser than what you'd ever find on your face. So the exact same peptide concentration that might trigger rapid, visible changes on your jawline, it's going to face exponential penetration resistance on the body. It's just a completely different physiological battleground.
Which brings us to the absolutely crucial concept of managing efficacy expectations. This slider graphic breaks down a balance that every consumer and formulator really needs to internalize. On one side, we have the achievable reality of cosmetic quality. We're talking improved surface texture, increased hydration, epidermal tightening, and tactile plumpness. Topical peptide applications improve skin quality and barrier function wonderfully. But on the other side of the slider is surgical alteration, changing fat distribution, altering anatomical contours, or getting non-surgical lifts. Topical products do not and biologically cannot alter underlying adipose tissue distribution.
You see, the most common marketing trap for body serums is promising these impossible surgical results, which just inevitably leads to consumer disappointment and incredibly high churn rates. That's exactly why EAORON's approach here is so noteworthy. By keeping their messaging restrained, they are actively building long-term trust. Let's look closely at how their leadership is positioning this, because honestly, it's a masterclass in realistic product marketing.
Not every Australian wants, needs, or can afford a surgical procedure.
We are bringing an ingredient-driven approach to body care to support the skin's state at home, rather than pretending a topical product is equivalent to surgery. That is Fernando Rodriguez, CEO of EAORON, laying out a highly rational, evidence-based market positioning.
This rational approach is exactly what's needed right now as the peptide battlefield broadens. Formulators are no longer restricted to just the face and eyes, where we typically see things like ardrelin and palmitoyl tripeptides. As this anatomical map shows, we've got pharmacy handling the lips for barrier and plumpness, L'Oreal tackling the scalp for follicle anchoring, and now EAORON targeting body density. Consumers are actively demanding systemic, full-body clinical treatments, and because of that, the barrier to entry for full-body clinical skincare is rising incredibly fast.
And make no mistake, the mass market is absolutely validating this trend with actual purchasing power. Peptide skincare isn't just some niche component story shared among enthusiasts anymore, it has fully transitioned into a primary driver of corporate earnings. To prove this, we just have to look at the latest financial validation data from Kenvue for the second quarter of 2026.
As you can see in this chart, Kenvue reported a very strong 5.1% growth in their beauty sales for Q2 2026. And the clear engines driving this growth? The peptide lines from Neutrogena and OGX. The mass market is officially voting with real dollars. Peptides are translating from exciting scientific potential directly into hard financial reality on the balance sheets of major conglomerates. But, of course, this massive surge in demand brings us to a rather severe supply chain strain, specifically when it comes to raw materials. Think about it. Body care products require significantly more raw material per unit than those tiny little facial serums. As peptides migrate to these high-volume body applications, global manufacturing capacity is facing unprecedented crunches in 2026. And the most acute bottleneck right now, it's with GHK-Cu, or copper peptides, specifically the highly sought-after 98% purity strains. To give you a real-world example of just how real this crunch is, U.S. manufacturer Mocus Group recently sent out an urgent warning. While they technically have the 98% purity GHK-Cu copper peptide in stock, they've been forced to place strict limits on all incoming orders. This high-purity strain has arguably become the most sought-after skincare ingredient of 2026, and the sheer high-volume demands of the body care sector are just draining global peptide capacity way faster than it can be produced.
So, synthesizing all of this data, we arrive at the new rules of body care. First up, formulation. Standard body lotions are effectively dead. Consumers today expect facial-grade baselines, precise dosing, and active signal peptides. Second, physiology. Because of that denser stratum corneum we talked about, brands have to scale their concentrations higher or completely modify their delivery systems. And third, positioning. Brands must market to clinical cellular skin health, not surgical anatomical reshaping. Simply put, the era of basic body hydration is over.
For anyone working in the industry, there are three key strategic takeaways tying all of this together. Number one, you must rethink packaging. Delivery mechanisms like single-dose capsules that protect against oxidation are going to become a massive differentiator. Number two, secure your supply chains immediately. If you're scaling peptides across large volume body SKUs, you need to lock in your raw material contracts, especially for things like copper peptides, well ahead of market launch. And number three, educate on timelines. Your marketing teams must actively explain the delayed efficacy cycle of dense body scan. Otherwise, you risk consumers abandoning the product way too early.
That's all for this episode. Like and comment to receive materials from us. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.